Hello and welcome to this week's episode of GIANT's Healthy Innovators TV. I'm your host. My name is Barry Shrier from GIANT Health. And as you know, we love to welcome all of our viewers from around the world. We're about bringing together leaders in innovation in healthcare. So every week we love to bring to you some of the most interesting and dynamic and capable people who are pushing boundaries in the innovation in technology and innovation in services and applications in healthcare. All of these innovators share our views and our values, which is that we aim to improve the health and the well-being of people around the world by promoting innovation and increasing the adoption of new technology and innovation in healthcare. So to begin with, I'd like to thank all of our viewers and listeners from around the world and encourage them to go to the GIANT website. As a reminder, GIANT website is www.giant.health. We'd also like to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Vodafone Business and our knowledge partner. Thank you, McKinsey. And we'd also like to thank all of the clinicians and leading doctors from the UK and abroad who've been working with us. Today, for example, I'm delighted to introduce you to our good friend and supporter of GIANT Health, Dr. Talac Mahmud. Hello, Tal. How are you?
Hi, Barry. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you. And thank you so much for joining us. Your time is valuable and you're doing a lot of very interesting things. So we appreciate you joining us today. So what we want to talk about is we want to talk about some big issues in society, some big challenges in healthcare, and in particular, of course, primary care, GPs and physicians, as they say in American. So to begin with, Tal, if you don't mind, we'd love to hear a little bit about the personal side. So could you share with all of our viewers from around the world a little bit about you and your personal background briefly and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Barry. I'm Tal. I'm a GP in West London. Despite looking remarkably young, I'm actually at the tail end of my career.
Wow.
Barry. I know, it's shocking. And I qualified as a doctor something like 25 years ago, so it's a long time.
Fabulous.
I was brought up in Birmingham, trained at King's a long time ago, but and then did a number of hospital jobs, ended up becoming a GP, and had a variety of roles, including commissioning roles and board level commission roles and providing roles as well. And so I've got two kids, Sammy and Zach, aged, this is a tough one, 9 and 7, I think. They're soon to be...
That's a question for the mother, not the father. That's
yeah,
where
exactly.
we always end up with that type of topic. But Tal, it's interesting you talk about, your career. In the middle of your career, they discovered penicillin. Did that make a big difference?
I think that was in the middle of your career, Barry.
Oh dear. Oh well, touché, as they say. So we're going to talk about some big issues in healthcare, obviously, and from your perspective. First of all, why did you elect to go into primary care? What were some of your motives to go into being a GP as opposed to another area in medicine? And second question relating to that. What are you seeing as big issues in healthcare? What are examples of big issues for GPs?
So it's funny, we've run, one of the projects we're working on at the moment is around supporting people with careers. And what's interesting is we get different people from different areas to talk about how they ended up in whichever career they've ended up. And
yes,
and there are very few people who have a really laser focused objective of becoming having a particular role.
Yes,
I certainly I want to be a hospital consultant. So
seriously?
Yes. So and so basically after medical school you have to do I wanted to be a gastroenterologist, and then I kind of struggled a bit with my postgraduate exams, and actually I failed it by 1% in my MRCP, and then I sat it again and I failed it by 5%, and the third time I sat it, I failed by 15%, and I thought, perhaps I'm not cut out for this. So I ended up becoming a GP, and actually it wasn't by design, but it's like an amazing job. You get the chance to um, you have a bit more control. You end up being able to decide how much or little work you want to do. You have a lot more flexibility. Some careers like surgery, certainly in the olden days, were, you know, uh, were not flexible opportunities and roles. And actually, I think general practice is arguably one of the best jobs in healthcare, because you do get to work with lots of other people, and actually you're a generalist. And I'll share one quick story. Actually, I remember um, a professor at King's who was like a world expert on biliary atresia. So he used to do operations on newborn babies who had problems with their bile duct and stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And you think, oh my God, like, and his outpatients were people who'd come to King's from around the world. And then, but actually, he's doing a very specialized, super specialized surgery. And that's probably pretty much all he did. And in general practice, you get to, you do, not super specialized work, but you do see a whole breadth of,
Exactly. Exactly. Must be incredibly challenging and also, permanently interesting. So, on that note, looking into general practice more specifically, what are examples of big challenges that you guys have been facing recently that relate to the opportunity for new innovation?
so I think there are the challenges in general practice are there is some overlap with healthcare generally. So that would be, it's well versed argument. So, increasing demand, reducing supply. So as in there, there are more people who, there are more treatments available. There are more
Yes.
elderly population, and expectations of the population are, people expect an answer more quickly, and
Yeah.
rightly so. So they have that in every other aspect of their lives, and why not in medicine, which is something that is actually arguably more important than many other aspects. So
Sure.
there's that, and then at the same time you have this kind of challenge with recruitment and retention, not just of clinicians, but also um, the non-clinical roles as well. So, and that's being played out, with the junior doctor strikes at the moment, and it's kind of tough. And then people are off sick because of stress at work and burnout, and then that adds more pressure to the people left behind. And so it is a huge challenge, and I think general practice is not immune to that. We
No, understood. Therefore, can you give us examples of innovation that you have seen or that you feel are in the pipeline, so to speak, that can address these challenges?
Yeah, I think the if you think about supply and demand, and you think about, well, supply side, well, what can you do on the supply side? And perhaps the answer there is, um, uh, you know looking for the for healthcare professionals to be able to look after themselves, their own mental health, their own well-being, supporting one another, supporting teams. So solutions that can help much easier navigation, much easier ability to deliver value for the clinician. So to take away the administrative duties as much as possible,
Oh,
to
okay.
allow collaboration between healthcare professionals, to take away the non-valuable aspects of work. And then for the demand side, it's about supporting patients. So it's about kind of, giving them all the tools that, that they have, that perhaps we have access to, and
Yes.
giving those to patients so that, they can support themselves, but we're always here to help if needed. So
Exactly. Yeah. Can you give us any direct examples? For example, have you guys brought a new supplier in that you're working with in these areas, or anything else you could talk about?
yeah, I mean, we're working on. we're working on a health inequalities project where we did some work a while ago. So it's going back to the supply demand thing. So people sometimes think that, the only way out of this conundrum is preventative care.
Okay.
So that's the only way you can deal with the supply demand thing. So
Yeah.
if you work on prevention today, then it reduces your demand tomorrow. We did some work basically being proactive with groups of patients about 5 years ago,
Right.
where we brought in patients and large groups, either small groups of about 6 people or large groups of up to 70 people.
Yes.
And we ran some educational workshops. And what we found actually is that our demand went down by 1,700 appointments over 12 months. And the speed of that was quite quick.
Yes.
So actually we thought we'd do some more work around that. So, and around health inequalities as well. So we're working with groups of patients, and groups of clinicians.
Right.
And so there are 3 broad themes. One is around supporting the major factors for health inequalities. So one is employment, the second is education, and the third is around the environment. And quite often healthcare professionals think that none of those things are really their responsibility. It's
Sure.
it's somebody else's. So actually
Exactly.
we've found that those are the determinants of poor health. And so we've done some work around that, and using social media, using webinars, and we even actually bought our first robot to help with promoting the webinars and supporting patients. And so I think if you look at the rest of the world in different industries, increasingly they are working with social media. So
Yes, absolutely.
and the question is, like, why not use social media in healthcare?
No.
Even banks who deal with very personal information, they're using social media for customer support.
Exactly.
So we've worked with a variety of people to help deliver some of this. We've got lots of partners in the NHS and the broader local health economy, and some national ones as well. And so we work with software and hardware companies. We haven't really worked with consultancy firms, but yeah, hardware and software, and that's things around creating social media content, analysis of data, and trying to understand how the data, online data, results in behavioural change,
Right.
and some stuff around the using robots predominantly to educate and entertain.
Nice.
And actually, the thing that we're doing at the moment is really interesting. So we're trying to have our waiting room as an experiential place where you can learn and have giant projectors everywhere. And
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's outstanding. Is that something which people have asked for, or is this more of a let's try it and see where it goes?
so we did a survey. This was about 2 years ago,
Okay.
during COVID. Actually, we
Right.
said, look, we asked our patients. I think surveys, you have to be quite careful about the questions that you posed in those surveys. There can't be closed questions. So
That's right.
it was really quite broad questions. So look, exactly your question. How can we help? How would you like to communicate with us? And we had about 2,000 responses in about
Oh, nice. Nice.
three
That's a good
days.
number.
It was fantastic,
Yeah.
and the people said that, look, we want you to communicate with us using social media, because that's what we use anyway. And they
Exactly.
said they want to do webinars, and it's interesting, Barry, because in our heads we were trained to, off disciplines. So discipline like gastroenterology or
Of course.
hematology or organs.
Yes.
And actually, patients are not organs; they are people. And
Well,
actually,
exactly. Yeah. I mean,
and
it's a challenge, and one can easily see how it came to be, because of course, how are you going to develop the necessary expertise in treating, for example, liver issues, unless you become a liver specialist, and likewise with any other aspect of the body. So you can see how the specialisms necessarily come to be, but you can also see obviously how that isn't in harmony with the patient's view of themselves. And in that respect, for example, do you feel like tech is directly addressing that? In other words, is social media directly addressing this? Uh, I don't know, is dichotomy the right word? The fact that doctors have to become specialists to gain necessary levels of expertise, but patients don't view themselves as a liver problem. They view themselves as a patient.
so I think that's a really good question. So going back to um, generalism versus specialism. So
Yes.
you've got the Professor Howard. I'm sure he won't mind me sharing his name. If you're listening, Professor Howard, I didn't say your job was boring. I just you're a amazing man. But so you need the Professor Howard. You need the true experts who really specialise in what they deliver, and they need to be able to deliver that. I think
Absolutely.
in the world of generalism, we need to look at patients holistically and actually ask for support where we kind of need that. And I think that technology is, I think sometimes like people think, oh, they see some form of technology, chat GPT or anything, for example, and say, look, you know let's just shove it into somewhere and see what happens, or without a really clear understanding of the problem.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
then they, that, I think technology, there's tons of technology out there, and then suddenly integration becomes like the big issue.
Of
and
course.
and so I think the way we see things, so we've set up innovation groups within our practice. We've got about 40 people who work, and they all work in little groups, and we never ask them to come up with any solutions or any technology. So we would just, because we're not experts, solution experts, we're problem experts, and so we really try to understand what the problem is. We're kind of fairly agnostic when it comes to the type of technology and stuff,
Yes.
but it's kind of talking to other healthcare professionals, spending that time doing some research and analysis,
Yeah.
and most importantly, talking to patients generally in large surveys or smaller groups or focus groups, and talking to the right people who are facing that challenge, and then but it's basically not stopping there. So then coming back to that same group or the larger groups, and then being part of that discussion so that you can develop things. So the technology piece actually comes kind of right at the end, I think.
No, understood. No, there's a lot more than the technology, and an awful lot of times we hear clinicians saying, "Well, look, the answer isn't another shiny, bright,
Yeah.
amazing new object. The answer is a broader understanding of if you will, the whole ecosystem or the whole process or that type of thing." On that note, let's talk about how do innovators engage with the NHS. Are there problems or challenges there? Do you have any experience you could help our listeners and viewers from around the world to understand if there is a business that wants to engage with the NHS, whatever that is? Could you share your experiences and
Yeah.
any guidance there?
Yeah, I think there are. The NHS is actually quite so. There is no the NHS,
Yeah, yeah,
which is what you kind of alluded to. But the NHS is a quite it's a huge collectively, it's a huge organisation. In Northwest London, the NHS covers a population of, which is where I work, 2.2 million people. It's got a budget of £4 billion,
Wow.
and it's the biggest employer collectively in the whole of the Northwest London.
Wow.
So those are big numbers, but actually to kind of get, if an organisation or a company or a person wants to kind of, it's not selling to BP or Shell or to Marks and Spencers. It's not like you can sell a product and it'll be on all the shelves across the country. So
exactly.
the thing is that they're all quite different organizations with different challenges, and you're going to have to sell within that organization many times.
Yes.
I think the but the NHS, the good news is, so on the one hand, it's kind of, there is a process and a way of different organizations working together. So, and that organizational structure actually is quite good, and they are making collective decisions and within the interests of the population as a whole.
Nice.
So that part is kind of good, but the challenge is like, you're going to have to try to understand the problems from each different individual, because they're all going to look at things from slightly different perspective. You need to get people on board with your idea. And actually, sometimes a smaller organization, like for example, general practice, is a much smaller organization, so they're more likely to respond more quickly to trials or pilots, and as long as it doesn't potentially, as long as you can articulate that it reduces demand, it reduces people's workload, doesn't add to their to their current workload. And so so I think it's a good and bad thing. So it's not one organization, but that makes entry into that market potentially easier, because if it were one organization, the only people who could sell to that giant organization would be generally other giant organizations.
Actually, that's a really good point. No, that's a very, very good point. Often there is a lot of criticism about the challenges of selling into the UK healthcare system due to its vast, complicated, disparate nature and ever evolving nature. But if it were a single organization, then there'd be no hope for small and medium-sized businesses, let alone startups. Because like you said, if you're of a global corporate level like IBM, then you can only sell to IBM if you were another IBM-like business. And
then you'd end up having to, basically, they'd have a tier of resellers and then subcontractors, and then so you're a long way away from actually the organization and patients, which is what you'll want to test your stuff on. I mean, I have to say that the NHS, with all its challenges and stuff, is generally like really quite open to innovation, and it's quite, it certainly supports trial. There's an old saying that the NHS has more pilots than British Airways. So because it is happy to test and try things, as long as it's safe and there are safeguards in place. But
that's a very good point. Do you engage, Tal, with NHS trusts? Could you help our viewers to understand what is a trust? Do you, in primary care, are you part of a trust, or do you engage with trusts? And we'd love to explore, challenges at the so-called trust level.
Yeah. So we, broadly speaking, so you got primary care, secondary care, tertiary care. So tertiary care would be super specialized services. For example, in Charing Cross, is a specialist stroke service, and at Chelsea and Westminster they have a specialist burns unit. So you have super specialist trusts, and back to the principle in King's, where you got experts who do very narrow field of medicine, but they're really, really good at it. So you have that, and then secondary care is a bit more kind of generalized. So in our case, we've got West Middlesex Hospital, which is it does have some specialist services, but predominantly you could think of it as the old-fashioned district general hospital, and and then you've got the primary care. So the way this is probably worth, I hope people may or may not be aware. So when you're thinking about entry levels into
exactly
with primary care,
which is a priority for all the innovators, I think, that tune in to us.
So I would say for the people who have an idea, it depends on the kind of scale that you are thinking of or have. So primary care is, you got a GP practice, which is probably something in the region of generally about 10,000-ish patients, and then you've got groups of GPs practices, which are generally about 70,000 odd patients. They're called primary care networks.
Okay.
And then you have a groups of primary care networks, which are, a bit larger. It's the old-fashioned CCG, so clinical commissioning group, which is probably a population of about 300,000 patients. And then you got the ICS, which is a population, depends on the part of the country, but in London generally it's about 2 million people-ish.
Yes.
So I suppose it depends on where your idea sits, and as to who you kind of approach, as to how large you are, what tests and trials you've done. One of the things that's quite hard to get your head around, actually, in the NHS when you're coming in with an idea, is like, who is your customer? So that in many walks of life, it's really quite obvious. You buy some apples and you go to the supermarket and you're the customer, you buy the apples and you leave. But in the NHS, if the definition of a customer is who pays, then actually it may be that, like, for example, our clinical IT systems in general practice, we don't pay for those. They are bought for us, and we have a choice of which system we use. But that system is bought by the old-fashioned CCG or the ICS. So is your customer the patient? Is it the user, the clinician that's using it, or is it the commissioner? So you kind of, if the commissioner is paying for the service, then and the clinician is facilitating that, but the end user is the patient, you've got quite a lot of different people to satisfy. So I think when you're talking to people, when you're talking to potential clients, it's probably worth really addressing those three elements in your pitch. To say, to make those, understand who the stakeholders are and who your customers are, and then make sure that you're delivering on what they need to see. So for the commissioners, it would be return on investment. For patients, it would be patient satisfaction or outcomes. For the clinicians, it would be reducing their workload.
Yes, almost as if one should go and do an MBA and create a matrix to define all of this.
Yeah, there is. I'm working on that. It's called the TAL matrix. I'll rename it with the Barry and TAL matrix, because as we've both come up with it together.
I think that's a good idea. The multiple stakeholder matrix.
Yeah.
MSM. But joking aside, Tal, this is very interesting, because this does get to the heart of challenges for innovation. And so innovation itself is tricky. It is bound to failure by definition. If you're not trying new things which are untested, then you're not innovating. And if they're new things which are untested, most of them aren't going to work. So intrinsic challenges there, on top of a complicated platform, which is provision of healthcare in the United Kingdom, the funding of it, the commissioning of it, the delivery of it, and so forth. So not an easy picnic, is it? But what's your view looking forward? With all of your many decades of experience in this,
Not
what would
not that.
you say are practical things? Like, let's say the chief executive of an ICB is on the conversation with us right now. What would you say to her? What should she do this year?
So I think it goes back to that supply and demand piece. I think the ICBs, look, we as a practice have the challenges around supply and demand, and the ICB has that at much bigger scale. And they do have a huge budget, but they also have like huge expenses as well.
Of course.
And so really truly the only way out of that challenge is I think is proactive care. So working to support people to remain healthy. Now that's a really tough one to, it's a tough one to quantify, because like if you prevent someone from, say stopping smoking, and then they don't get lung cancer, it's quite hard to count something that doesn't happen.
No.
And then to put a number on that, so it becomes quite kind of challenging. But ultimately, I think the things that the challenges that the ICBs have at the
Yes.
moment, one is that they're a relatively new organization. They're kind of finding their way around themselves, and they're dealing with huge budgets, and and they've got their own pressures as well. And then at the but they've got the kind of, it's quite difficult for them to make decisions, right? Because they've got boards from representatives from like major hospitals and major community healthcare trusts,
Well,
and
absolutely.
it's really hard to make decisions. But I kind of and they also have to find a way around this huge problem around recruitment and retention. Even if they're not providing, they have to support a system that helps the providers to deliver
That's right.
on what the ICB strategic aims are.
Yes.
So
Yes. Do you have any intentions of answering the question?
I've forgotten what it is now, Barry. It's such a long time since you last spoke.
So we're talking to the chief executive of an ICB right now, and what are we telling her to do right now this year to help with innovation?
So what you ask for and what happens on the ground are two different things. So
Yes.
I would, if I had to ask for a wish list to
Yes.
support innovation, I would say, we've got to actually deliver innovation rather than talk about it.
Yes.
It's got to be, as been kind of trying to get across, it's got to be real things, real examples with real people. We've got
Right.
to have a system which allows that to allows collaboration and with innovators and organizations, understanding the problems and helping trials and pilots. I think it would be nice to be able to give some seed funding as well to support that piece of work.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
I,
at the ICB level. So
I
ICB
think
is
so.
taking some of their funding and carving that off for fueling innovation.
I think so, because look, each ICB has their own set of challenges, and
Yes.
so they can set out their priorities, and they could say, and those innovators, they may be people who work within the NHS infrastructure itself, which can help with recruitment and retention, or they could be bringing in outside people to work with clinicians, which will actually support recruitment and retention. And I think something that we've done, and actually we've kind of Google has done it for a long time, and we tried to copy their stuff. Is basically if if I had one big wish for ICB chairs, it would be basically give all your staff at least half a day or a day off a week to work on innovation, either developing ideas themselves or working with outside organizations.
Perfect.
And
exactly. What has been very successful in a lot of large organizations around the world to accomplish a number of goals. Number one, innovation, obviously, but number two, to improve the sense of empowerment that individual members of your team feel, and therefore to improve the quality of their contribution, the quality of their life, and that type of thing, which has even more snowball effect, knock-on effects. Tal, I'm really sorry we've run out of time, but that's
already
a perfect thing to end on.
I was just getting warmed up, Barry.
I know, which is why we've run out of time. No, pardon me for being cheeky, but Tal, that is such an interesting idea. And I'd love for us to take that to the ICB Congress at Giant Health this year and to present that as a challenge for all of the ICSs.
Honestly, it works for Google. So I mentioned this I shared what we do as a practice to NHS Trust Chair in Northwest London, and she said, "Oh no, we couldn't possibly do that because we've got thousands of employees, and it wouldn't work." Well, it may not work, but I think it could work if you tried it on perhaps on a smaller scale. But Google has got much more employees than that NHS Trust.
Exactly.
And it does work for them, and they're a commercial organization. And I think the NHS staff, not as customers, but actually partners with external companies working together, I think it's incredibly valuable for everyone.
Huge.
And it will help recruitment and
retention.
retention.
Just today, right now, started a revolution, and I'm pleased to be your inspiration for that. So, Tal, thank you so much. I am sorry we've run out of time, but
thank you, Barry. So one revolution and one theory of management practice. So that's Absolutely. Not bad for half an hour, is it?
No, we've got a PowerPoint slide out of it. So value has been created as a certainty. Tal, honestly, I've enjoyed our conversation. I wish we had a lot more time, but perhaps what we could do is we could continue this. Let's say, for example, 6 months from now, we could do another episode and see what has come out of this. And but Tal, good luck with everything. We really appreciate your time. I think that your work in primary care is inspiring, and a lot of the ideas and approaches that you have taken are really admirable. So thank you, and congratulations on all of that.
Thank you so much for having me, Barry, and good luck to everyone with ideas and getting those working on the ground. So exactly. The NHS is a great place to be.
Exactly. No, agree 100%. So once again, thanks to Dr. Talac Mahmud, who has been with us today, a very high profile and successful and informed innovator in the world of primary care and the provision of healthcare in the UK. Thank you, Tal. This has been this week's episode of GIANT's Healthy Innovators TV. We'd like to remind all of our viewers, if you like these episodes, please like them on our YouTube channel and subscribe. We'd also like to hear from everybody. So if you have any suggestions regarding subjects for our episodes or speakers to join us in these conversations, don't hesitate to contact us. Please go to our website, www.giant.health. Lastly, we invite everybody to come to our big annual event, which is the UK's leading festival of everything healthcare, technology, and innovation, 4th and 5th of December in London, England. So we hope to see all of you there. My name is Barry Shrier. I've been your host, and thanks again to Dr. Talac Mahmud, and we hope all of you have enjoyed this week's episode. Thank you very much.